Well, hi everyone. Welcome to USCIS Green Card, to this live session, special live session because it's the first time ever that we are joined by a U.S. immigration attorney, Mr. Evan Law. Welcome to the channel.
Thank you so much. It's great to be with you.
And we are going to introduce him in a second, but let's briefly talk about what we're going to do today. I'm sure we already have people. I see some comments already popping up. So we're going to gather a pretty decent group of people interested in EB2 NIW. Today, we're going to focus mostly about EB2 NIW. In the Q&A later, we can open up a little bit as well if Evan is up for that. But Evan is here today to provide his expertise as a U.S. immigration lawyer working with manifest law, and also as a former USCIS agency at the infamous AAO office, the Administrative Appeal Office. And he's going to tell us a little bit about his work, what he does, what he used to do, and also he's going to provide some insights on the EB2 NIW category that we discuss here in this channel so much. We focus here on do-it-yourself routes for EB2 NIW, EB1A, but we always say that we recognize that the do-it-yourself route is not the only route, and some people may want to hire a lawyer. And even if you don't want to hire a lawyer, you better listen to the people who knows about the category. In this case, people like Evan Law, who is doing this, and we are so grateful for your presence. So thank you, Evan. Thank you to everyone who is watching, and please also type where you're watching from, because we love to know where you guys are geographically and what are your professions, what are you interested on, EB2 NIW, EB1A, O1s, whatever it is, let us know. And with that, also welcome Marina.
Hi, hello.
How are you doing?
Everyone? I'm fine, thank you.
And Marina and I will be moderating. Usually Marina is in charge of moderation. Today we're going to share the responsibility, and we're going to be moderating the questions later. But first, let's go with Evan. Please introduce yourself. Welcome to the channel, and tell us something about EB2 NIW.
Sounds good. And I'll say, Oscar, I found your channel earlier this year, and I never dreamed I'd be actually on it. So thank you for allowing me to be here. It's great, the work that you do. So I've been working in the immigration field for about 17 years. I've worked for in private practice for family-based and employment-based immigration firms. And then I was with the Administrative Appeals Office for 7 years, spread over 2 different administrations. So that was very interesting. I loved my time there. I adjudicated EB1 cases, was the last visa type I did, but I did EB1s, EB2s, and EB3s. I was there at the AAO when Matter of Danisar came out, so that was a big deal. Actually, Danisar sent an email out to the director of the AAO, and he shared that with us. So we'll probably talk about that a little bit, but it was very eye-opening. The prior framework was quite complex, and so it was nice to see this kind of step forward.
Because
so
many people don't know that Danisar is actually a person, right? An applicant that filed and appealed, and he went through the whole process of EB2 NIW.
Yeah, that's right. And so he wrote just this really heartfelt email, just thanking us for taking the time to really dive in and explore a new framework for EB2 NIWs, and just how impactful that was for him. It was just a nice message. And then our deputy just put a nice reminder to say, listen, we need to remember that everybody's lives are tied to these cases that we're working on. So it's great to see.
That's awesome. I think not many people have that experience that you had, so it's great to have you today.
Sounds good. I'm glad to be here.
And yeah, well, this is you. I guess this is what we were discussing, and now you work with Manifest, right? Do you want to say something about your current job?
I've just loved being with Manifest. It's such a it's like the dream job I didn't know I was ever looking for. So just so happy to be with them, and it's great to have interactions with the clients that reach out to us, in terms of we're really just trying to put them first and move their case forward the best way we can.
And I'm seeing some comments already, like here Mitilesh, who we know actually, is saying welcome Evan to the channel. and some other people are saying thank you for doing this. You know, we appreciate your work, and so there's already a good number of comments. Actually, people watching from all sorts of places: Bahrain, Orlando, Florida, a nurse. So Boston, Massachusetts. I think this one has a question as well. So later we're going to get back to that. But first, I think you have some material to share with us, and we're so excited about it.
Yeah, sounds great. Okay, so just a refresher on what the Danosaur standard is. So you have these 3 prongs. The first one has 2 components to it. The second part of that is the most important one, but you have to show your proposed endeavor has substantial merit and national importance. Talk about that more in a moment. Then you have to show in prong 2 that you're well positioned to advance it. That's where USCIS will be looking at, okay, what have you done in the past that's indicative that you'll be able to be successful with this? What business plan do you have in place, or things like that? Prong 3 is on balance whether this makes good sense to waive the labor certification process. And so that's kind of a balancing test where you're looking at the national importance as opposed to the requirements that is normally needed to protect U.S. workers. In essence, it's why does it make sense to go forward with this? So one of the things about this framework is that there are overlapping aspects to them. In essence, we've said that these prongs 1 and 2 talk to each other in a way. So, for example, if you're really broad in for national importance, you kind of think you need to be very broad to have such an impact. But on the other hand, if we can't tell what it is that you're going to be doing, it's really hard to determine whether you're well positioned to do that, right? So there's these kind of aspects that kind of go hand in hand with each other. On the other hand, if you make things so specific, and then the officer looking at your past experience says, there's a little bit of a disconnect between your experience, then that makes it harder to show that you're well positioned to advance it. So, we'll talk about a lot of these nuances, but in prong 2, also you're talking about your education and work experience. That would be a good place to talk about any funding that you have. The more that you can show that your proposed endeavor is already in progress, that can go a long way as well. So, but you need all of these, right? And so the main thing is starting with this national importance. And one of the challenges with these case types is there's really not a one size fits all. There are people like Danosaur was in the aerospace engineering field and working on hypersonic flight and things like that. There are other aerospace engineers that have applied for it, and their cases unfortunately were denied. And so it's not one of those things that you can just say, okay, if we select this endeavor, we're a lot, right? And so this is why these things are really helpful to think through what your proposed endeavor is. How does it line up with national priorities, and then establish the evidence around. So you can go to the next slide here. Okay. So, like I was saying, some of these RFEs come back saying your proposed endeavor is too vague. Sometimes people try to, so many of us have this kind of well-rounded aspect to our careers that sometimes we might combine 2 things, or someone might combine 2 aspects of their experience into an endeavor. Well, that might weaken the focus of it as to, well, what exactly is it that you will be focusing on? So one of the things that I ask people when I have consultations is I say, what is it that you're trying to solve? What is the gap in the country? What is it that you're proposing that would improve things, right? And in a way, that's what the business world is made up of, for the American dream, right? This opportunity to create something. And we look at it from, I mean, the days of typewriters. I remember when I was in my undergrad studying economics, we wrote a paper on whether it was good for computers to take off and what happened to the typewriter industry, right? Clearly, we're better off with the computer uh, industry that's moved forward. And so, but what happens is the more you're able to convey to the USCIS officer that there's this value that you're planning to add to the country, that allows the officer to see that, okay, yes, I see the national importance of what they're accomplishing. Okay, so this last part we have here, if you can't explain it in 30 seconds, like an elevator pitch to both a 10-year-old and an accomplished professional, it's probably not going to resonate with USCIS. Now, the reason for that comment is basically the more you can simplify things to a point, and it's not to say you want to just keep everything short and concise, but in your basically conclusions, you want to be able to describe, this is why we're doing this. This is, what will improve the economy or these other national priorities.
Sorry,
Go
let
ahead.
me interrupt. I love what you're saying, because we usually say, I never seen the 10-year-old child kind of thing, but we usually say, you have to be able to explain it to your uncle or to your sister that is not on your field. If they don't get it, then you have to do something about it, because it's not going to be effective.
Right. Well, and one of the nice things about just that thought about talking to, so I do have a 10-year-old son, right?
Mhm.
We have 5 kids. And so I've answered a lot of questions. And what usually happens is you answer one question, and then they ask another question and another question. And so it forces you to pare down and say, oh, okay, well, this is how now I'll explain it a little better.
Right.
And that's really what the USCIS officer would love to do. If they had you in their office, they'd say, okay, you're doing this, tell me more about this. And then I'm still not understanding, how does that benefit this sector? And then you provide more. So I think that's a helpful thing to keep in mind. But you really want both. You do want to show your expertise. In other words, I'm saying, don't water everything down, but be able to both speak about the complexities of what you're doing, as well as simplifying it to what an officer can grasp.
Right. Yeah. Great points.
Okay, so to stress test your proposed endeavor, here's just a few thoughts I have. Sometimes when, clearly people are going to learn about the framework or have known about it for some time. And so there is this period of time where people say, okay, well, what type of an endeavor would I do? Well, if you land on something that you're doing just to kind of check off the boxes, or for, as we're saying here, if you put the project on the shelf, if your case is denied later on, that kind of conveys that it really wasn't a true endeavor for you. We want to see the more that your passion comes out, your career path, and the things that you're working on, that you're going to continue working on those because they're meaningful to you. And this goes back to the business world as well. A lot of businesses fail, but success comes out of that. People pick themselves back up and they move forward. And oftentimes from the failure, from the setbacks, that's where growth happens. And then you pivot, and then you are able to maybe refine your plan and then succeed. And so what I suggest to people oftentimes is as we're talking about what their career path has been and what they would love to accomplish, I have this conversation of, what are you passionate about? What would you like to see change? What improvements can be made in your field? And then what can you do to basically propose an endeavor and move forward with that? And then how could you maybe modify it in a way that aligns with these national priorities? So those are some thoughts I have with that. And then an underlying piece of this is, when you have that passion toward your endeavor, the support letters are going to be much stronger, right? People can talk about what they've seen you working on and what you're passionate about, and that can really improve the quality of the evidence that you provide.
Yeah. So it has to be organic at the end of the day. I mean, it cannot come out of nowhere. It has to be something that you're good at, like you said, passionate about. I mean, you can write endeavors one way or another, better or worse, but at the end of the day, if you're not authentic, it's going to be obvious with the evidence.
Yeah, definitely. And that's really what goes into even that second prong about showing that you're, well positioned to advance
Right.
it. Well, if your heart's not in it, the officers are looking for that authenticity, and oftentimes it can come out. And the one reason I bring up the support letters is oftentimes that's where the authenticity comes out, as whether if it's lacking, you can really sense it. I'm not. There's a lot of vague things people are talking about it. Those are just some thoughts on.
Yeah, I don't know. In Spanish, we have a saying that is, the paper can hold everything. But in EB2 NIW, it's not only about the narrative, which should be good, of course, but then the evidence. If you write a lot of nice things, but then they get to the exhibits and it's not supported, maybe it's not going to work out.
Yeah, that's the perfect comment. Yeah, do you mind going to the next slide? Okay, so here are some of the things, and actually your last comment goes really well with this slide, because here are some triggers for RFEs. Sometimes that vague language or the high level buzzwords, little detail about what you actually do, or lacking a connection to your background, or if there's this disconnect with hyperbole, if you're using these huge words, transform or revolutionize, and then if there's a mismatch between what the officer reads and then when they get to the support letters and all the evidence that you have, that can really take the wind out of your sails. And I remember seeing that as an adjudicator, where I would read a cover letter and just be really positive, thinking, oh wow, this is excellent, this looks like a case that's heading in the right direction. And then when I got to the evidence, it fell flat. And so you really want to have this strong connection between what you're speaking about. And this is also a good thing to keep in mind with the world of AI that we live in. AI can write some amazing things for you, but you need to go back through it and make sure that what it's stating is still connected with the reality of who you are and who you're becoming. The nice thing with EB2 NIWs is that there is this forward-looking aspect. And oftentimes I compare and contrast this with EB1 cases, which go completely towards what you've already accomplished. But because your proposed endeavor is this future work that you're going to be engaged in, there is this aspect of, you can talk about the goals that you've been working towards for all these years, but you really need to be supporting that by the stepping stones that establish you're moving towards it and accomplishing what you need to. So this final thought, it's great to be ambitious. Your ambition, though, needs to be grounded and connected with your expertise and supported by the evidence. Okay, so let's go back one slide. Actually go forward, I think. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here are a few examples from cases from the AAO. And these were all approvals. I'll talk about some aspects of a few denials in a moment. But so here's an example of a biomedical engineer. So the AAO talked about the academic colleagues in her field, explained that her research has the potential to advance research for brain health, in particular early detection and preventive strategies for neurodegenerative diseases. Okay, so I wanted to read that whole thing out. So we look at, okay, so that's what you would say to the professional. Now, what would you say to the 10-year-old child? You would basically say, okay, this research is helping people determine that they have like a brain disease. or something, right? You have this way of simplifying it down. And so from the way this would have been written, it would have been really helpful for the conclusion to have been something along the lines of this issue with brain cancer is exploding, or I don't know the details, but for them to say this research will go towards helping people find out earlier that they have brain
So
cancer.
would you say
you know,
that it helps to frame things a lot of times from the point of view of a problem, and to let the officer understand the gravity of the problem, so then you can come and say, and this is my proposed endeavor, I'm going to tackle this problem that I told you about. Is that a good strategy?
That is a great strategy. And taking it back to the 10-year-old child again, you almost think, well, what did the child say when you accomplished it? So what did you do? How did you succeed in this? And maybe to even frame this of what does success look like? What is success going to look like? What is this research going to do for the future? And one overarching challenge with the EB2 NIWs is that researcher, which is good for researchers, but Danosar was a researcher case, and a lot of these approvals that I was going through from the AAO over the past year were from researchers mostly. So it's almost like some people in certain professions might say, well, maybe I'm not in the right profession to move this forward. But I would say you shouldn't limit yourself to or basically feel like your profession is not well aligned for this, because there's a wide variety of NIWs that are approved in a wide variety of ways. So, for example, for this next one, this is again a researcher case, but in this case, the focus is on developing research to have crops that are better resistant to diseases, right? And so this would be a perfect time to talk about the food industry, the ways this would impact how crops impact the economy and things like that. On this last one with an electrical engineer, I'll get back to the researcher one in a moment, but just going to that point about different positions still can qualify for this. In this case, the matter was approved. They focused on this broader benefit and implications of the person's work, had a potential impact on the global energy supply and safeguarding against power plant failures, right? And so there's aspects of that can be simplified more in a conclusion. But going back to the second one, so the AAO, well, so initially the USCIS held that the person's endeavor demonstrated the national importance, but they held that he was not well positioned to advance the endeavor. And so then on appeal, the AAO noted there were strong support letters, substantial breakthroughs in his research, and research grants. And so one thing that I'll say as a difference between a filing with the USCIS versus an appeal, for anyone that's considering an appeal, is generally there's a big issue of time here. The time constraints people are under at USCIS it's a very tight window that they have to review your documentation. If you file an appeal afterwards, the AAO officers have more time to go through your case, and really they have to, because the next level for them is federal court, and so they don't want to be overturned by federal court, and so there's a more thorough analysis done there. But in essence here, the AAO has held, listen, the evidence is strong to support the fact that this person is well positioned to advance this.
Right.
So those are some thoughts from a few cases. I will say just generally, I mentioned earlier, so Danosar in aerospace engineering. So even just a year after Danosar came out, another aerospace engineer applied, and basically his proposal was not specific enough. There was language in there that said he was really going to bring kind of these three aspects of his research all together, and it really just didn't concisely convey what was his actual endeavor and what was the purpose of it. So these are just some thoughts on a few examples.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
You mentioned Danazar, and we are reviewing with you these AAO examples. So what is the likelihood that we can see another precedent decision? Because all of these cases are non-precedent decisions that we can go and check actually in the AAO website. What is the chance that at some point, is it random chance that suddenly there is a new precedent case like Danazar and we all have to adhere by that? Like, what is the likelihood of something like that happening?
Yeah, good question. And I'll say one of the reasons why Danazar was developed is because the other test was so confusing. There were just as officers worked through that, they would just kind of wonder how exactly are we to handle a situation like this. And so I don't think it's likely that Danazar will be changed because it seems to have opened up a framework that gives enough discretion to the officers to understand what the principles are underlying this. It's a discretionary case type, so there's no way to get around the fact that it's going to be a subjective analysis. And so if you have a framework that is so rigid, that can kind of like how matter of NISDOT was, and almost contradictory. I don't know. There were just some complexities. No offense to anyone who worked on matter of NISDOT, if you're listening to this. I don't think you are. But the fact is, if you have a framework that is so specific that limits the officer's ability to say, okay, we've never seen a case like this before, but normally I would think that this would go towards a national importance, but I have all these rigid rules that we've got to line up, and so that can be restrictive. So one of the things I like with the Danazar framework is that it did make this much more accessible in a lot of ways. So, for example, somebody could have a regional impact that spreads out to the economy, and that can be viewed to be in that have national importance. So the other aspect of this, in assessing whether someone is well positioned to carry that out, well, I think that makes sense as well, because you just don't want people, potentially they could just start coming up with the greatest ideas of all time, but have no interest in carrying them out. And so the officers are left saying, okay, well, he's got a great idea, let's approve that. So overall, I don't think it's likely that it will be changed. Potentially, it might we might see that this is actually implemented into regulations. I think that's a potential that might come out in
like policy manual changes and
yeah, potentially. So we'll see on that. Yeah. So basically, if you look at this self-check for your endeavor, going back to whether you can explain this to a 10-year-old and a colleague, oftentimes, so I've published a couple of novels, just self-published, but in the process of approaching publishers, you really have to get good at that elevator speech, which is, what is your book about? And this is kind of like, what is your endeavor about? And I would give the example of Jerry Seinfeld, where he would go to clubs over and over and over again to test out his jokes on people and see what their responses were. And I would suggest people might even consider doing that. Talk with a colleague about what your proposed endeavor is and see what their reactions are. If they're kind of like, I'm kind of confused, who would that help? Or, the more you do that, the more that can help you understand where you can pivot, where you can make your proposed endeavor more concise. Okay, so another point was just, does this reflect work that I'm already doing or building towards? Do my letters of support actually support this? You want to be viewing this in the totality of this. And so it's authentic, as we discussed. if you strip out all the big adjectives like that hyperbole we talked about, there's still a solid concrete plan. And that's really where you go to this kind of simplicity. So these are good things for you to go through. If you have trouble in any of these questions, that's how you realign. That's how you pivot towards something else. If you see the response of one of your colleagues that says to you, I'm not impressed. So for my wife, I can always tell by the look on her face, and she doesn't need to say anything. I'm like, okay, I got to rework this, right? So find some people that you can talk through this with, and that should help you align your endeavor.
That's a good, very good tip, and I'm glad because we give the same recommendation actually in our courses. So yeah, that works perfectly. Yeah, so that's it, right, Evan?
So those are the thoughts that I have, and I'll be happy to take any questions anyone has. And
no, thank you so much. I think these are really, really useful points for an EB2 NIW proposal. That proposal endeavor is like you said, is the central point. So you need to have that part really, really clear, and then you can develop everything else, either if you're doing it by yourself or with the help of a lawyer, of course. We're going to go to Q&A in a second, but before that, let me just talk a little bit about our resources that we have, because remember that the first question you need to ask yourself is, do I qualify or not? And you can answer that question by looking at the USCIS website, going through all the material, looking at your credentials, and you can also leverage the help of a lawyer that can give you an informed consultation with you. But once you have that clear, if you are going to go to one of these routes, EB2 NIW, EB1A, whatever it is, you have two options. You can do it yourself, or you can file with an attorney. Those are really the two big options that we have today. So we wanted to take 1 minute to tell you the resources that you can leverage in either of these situations. If you are going to do it by yourself, well, I mean, I'm biased. We're in Oscar's Green Card, so we're going to talk about the resources we offer. We offer online courses that teach you how to prepare your own petition, but this is not us holding your hand and doing any individualized advice. We are not lawyers, so you have to get in there, watch our video lessons, understand everything that we are discussing today and more about proposed endeavor, letters, and everything, and figure out how you will craft your own petition. So oscarsgreencard.com, we have a variety of courses now, from an introduction and how to build your profile for any of these categories. And then we have EB2 NIW specialized course, EB1A specialized course. And this year we launched unfortunately, our RFE course. I say unfortunately because the reason is we see more and more RFEs. So this is really our current ecosystem for courses. But if you think your do-it-yourself route is not for you for a variety of reasons, then today we are offering, because we're doing this session with Manifest Law, we are offering you a consultation with Manifest. So if you go to this URL that you have on screen, that you can also find in this QR code that you should see by now, then you can have that consultation with a lawyer like Evan. Maybe it's not Evan, but they have a big group of very good lawyers, and they will evaluate your case. And if you enter in an agreement with them for a limited time, you can get a $500 discount if you go through that link. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity for people to really take a look at this, either if it's do it yourself or if you're going to go with lawyers like I was discussing right now. And remember, we're going to start the Q&A in a second. Marina and I are not US lawyers. Evan is a lawyer, but today this is a session in which he is not going to give individualized advice. He's not going to give you legal advice. He's going to offer information, general information about the process, so nothing here can be construed as a client-attorney relationship, right, Evan? That's very important.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So I think we're ready. We're going with the intro, and we start the Q&A. so we have about 25 minutes, I think, to go, and I was just checking that we actually have a good audience today in terms of numbers. We always have a good audience, but we have people from Hungary, from Pakistan, Michigan, Cameroon, Poland, so Vietnam. So we have really a lot of people watching and saying hi. So hi to all of you. And we're going to start with one question. And please remember that we cannot answer all the questions. We're having a lot. So we're going to try to go through as many as we can. So let's start with one that is a little bit specific, but maybe, Evan, you can shed some light here. This person says, my project is recovery of aluminum from a landfill through mining. Two counties have shown interest in my project if I scale up. I have no citation record. Do I have a good case? I am yet to publish. So this is an industry case, no publications. What is your general take on these kind of cases?
Okay, so one thing to keep in mind, oftentimes people look at publications and citations and they kind of hone in on that. But what I would start with is let's look at what your background is and what about your background will showcase that you are the best person to do this, right? And the first thing I would mention is that right now you have 2 counties that have shown interest in this. I'd like to see that expand quite a bit. And so what I would start with is go all in trying to widen that and determine how big of an impact can this be. So this is going to earlier where you can imagine my 10-year-old son saying, well, how many states is that going to impact? Well, it's just here in this one state, right? So the more you can look at the kind of the outcomes from that would be very helpful. And then what I would say is what was it that triggered this idea for you? What is the problem you're trying to solve? Is aluminum leaching into the land or something? Is there some and this shows my lack of scientific knowledge. I don't know if what the implications would be here with aluminum in the landfill, but being able to recycle that and use that, what would that impact be going forward? So then I would look at with that, once you get that pinned down, then you want to look at, okay, why am I the best person to bring this forward? Then you want to showcase, okay, here are the things that I've done working in this recycling industry, and you kind of go from there. So you don't have to publish material or have citations to move forward with something like that. But the more the experience that you can have that demonstrates this is a project you could do and that would have an enormous benefit, that would be where I would start.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and to get specific advice, you would have to go and have a consultation. Of course, that's always the case. So, do we have something,
we
Mary?
have more. Adam, he's watching from Boston, Massachusetts, and he's starting the self-petition EB2 NIW process. His main question is around the proposed endeavor. He asked us if it's one sentence, 2 sentences, or how to form this statement.
Good question. You really want to have more than just 1 or 2 sentences. You want this to be something that you can talk about for a long time, right? That's where kind of your passion about something will come about. The reason I say that is because there are many facets to this, to any endeavor. It's how are you going to accomplish this? What's the overarching objective? How is it going to have an impact nationally and these types of things? So you do want to be able to condense it into a sentence or 2, especially in those conclusions that I was talking about. But what I would suggest you start doing is even just brainstorming and writing as much as you can to discover what it is that you will be accomplishing, and then from there, hopefully, it comes together that you see it being concise enough, but also give enough details so that the officer understands what it is that you're planning to do.
Right. And we have also some questions about EB1. I don't know if do you mind if we also talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would love to. Yeah.
So we have one from that is a little bit long, so I'm going to try to go through it. But this is from actually one course member, so I know this person. EB1A published material criterion. He is asking, well, it seems he got an RFE, and he says that they ask about the title, date, and author of the article that he submitted. He rechecked the print newspaper and realized that the article does not list any author at all, no byline, no staff attribution. So if a publication itself does not identify an author, is it acceptable to respond by simply showing the article as published and stating that no author is listed in the original source? So basically, does the author requirement mean the author as listed in the publication? So what is your take on how to deal with that kind, which is common, I think, right?
Yeah, it is something that comes up quite a bit. So unfortunately, the way the regulations are written, that is a requirement. And so what I would say is hopefully you have other publications that you were able to submit that do meet all those requirements. And so with something like that, the way I would respond to that is so this is tricky because I'm, specifically giving you advice on this, but usually in these scenarios, you have to make the decision whether you're going to, it is the fact that there's no author listed. So there's nothing you can do about that other than say, okay, while there is no author listed here, then discuss what the meaningful aspect of it is. This comes from a reputable source, or whatever you'd like to highlight about it, but then pivot towards the other evidence that you have submitted.
To prioritize maybe other things that would fulfill what USCIS is asking for, if possible. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Good. Thanks. Marina?
Another question related to the EB1A process. How long after a denial should you wait to reapply if the denial has based on a few small details?
Good question. There's really not a set time you need to wait. So I remember getting cases where I saw a prior denial and I thought, oh, well, it looks like this officer took a really strict approach on this. And the other thing to keep in mind is sometimes it takes a while, depending on whether you're filing premium processing or regular processing. One thing I'll say is this: there is something that happens when adjudicators see that there was a prior denial, and so this is why I reference the details that I went through. But the initial thought that the officer tends to have is, I wonder why this was denied before. That's clearly not a positive part of their mind. But that said, officers should have an open mind about the evidence that you're submitting. So if you're, in one way of thinking of this, sometimes people are deciding, should I file an appeal or just refile? If you are looking at that decision, then, and in other words, you feel like the decision was way off course, and that your case should have been approved, that these were very minor issues that shouldn't have impacted it. If you're filing an appeal, you're going to do that right away. So it really makes no difference in my view. So the officer is not going to say, well, wait a minute, this person filed just right afterward. No. A lot of this comes down to not knowing what the reasons were. If the decision was focused on things like saying, you haven't, established these certain things about your background, and all of a sudden you're presenting new evidence that wasn't submitted the first time, well, that can be problematic as well. So in part, it's hard to fully answer that, other than say, you kind of just have to weigh out what your viewpoint is. If you feel like there were things that could be improved upon you developing yourself more, then that might make better sense to wait and have a better chance of approving this. But I mean, you kind of just have to weigh out both of those. If the decision was wrongly issued, I mean, that's the reason why there is an appeal process, right? Or you can't even go straight to federal court for those. It's more expensive, so you have to weigh that out. But like I said earlier, with an appeal, you do get a more thorough adjudication for the time that's able to be spent on it. And then from the federal court perspective, you also do get even a more objective viewpoint, because this is a federal judge that handles a lot of different cases, and they're looking at this from like the statutory framework. So that was a very long-winded answer. Hopefully that.
I mean, long answer for a complicated question. So my take, I think, from what I'm hearing is that in order to file an appeal or even go beyond that to federal court, you really have to be confident that a clear mistake was being made. If it's within the realm of the discretionary nature that you discussed earlier of this category, it's probably not going to cut it. There needs to be solid evidence that they adjudicated this case wrong. If not, probably not the best idea.
Agreed. And that one might be a good time where you either discuss the case with several colleagues, several family members, or several attorneys, and you get various takes on what people's viewpoints are.
Right. And someone is asking, is this being recorded? Is this going to be in the channel? Yes, this is going to stay in the channel. So if you're here, we're happy that you're here with us. But if you have to leave or something, you will find the information later on as well. Here we have a question that is also quite specific, but maybe we can make it a little bit more general about adjustment of status, which is, I have my EB2 approval. Congratulations. I am currently in the US with a B2 visa. However, I have admission for a master program scheduled in January. I have applied for a change of status to a student visa. Will this affect my adjustment of status in the future? So, I mean, this is a very specific situation, but this situation happens to many people where they change status from non-immigrant visa number 1 to number 2, and they are waiting for the green card. So how can all this affect an adjustment of status?
Yeah, so the officers understand that there are long wait times for the EB2 categories. Depending on what country you're from, this can be a very extended wait time. And so, no, this won't affect that. There's several complexities with this question, because these non-immigrant or temporary visas do have a requirement that you will return to your home country after the visa expires. Oftentimes people take a path that is similar to what you're describing, doing the F1 student visa and then moving on to an H1B. And the H1B is a dual intent visa, so then that's fine with the, you can have the intent to adjust status. So the one question that would come from this is, would you have any issues with the approval of the student visa from someone an officer knowing that you have the EB2 approval? In my view, that shouldn't impact things, because during that whole time that you are waiting for your green card, you can travel back to your home country. People do it all the time, and so there's this kind of balance between, you still need to have the intent to return to your home country, but a very complex legal question is, well, what if somebody intends to then get an H1B visa? Is that problematic? Well, it shouldn't be. The H1B allows for the dual intent, so it's almost like splitting hairs at that point. So in my view, I don't think you should have any issues. But this is one of those things that kind of shows how complex immigration law is. And so hopefully you don't have an officer that just takes an issue with that. In my view, they shouldn't. But yeah, it shouldn't affect your adjustment of status in the future. Because, I mean, what's the alternative? In a way, if you get the EB2 NIW approved, but you have such a long wait time, well, there are other things that people need to do to maintain their status.
Right. Yep. Let's move to the next one. And by the way, this is a classic example of a type of question that I would say, well, if you are really in doubt at some point where you're going to do an adjustment of status, that's probably the right time to consult with a lawyer, because only that lawyer will be able to look at all your documentation and really give you advice that is directed to you specifically. So, yeah.
Yeah. So the next one is Sayomi. She asks us about the prompt 2. Can I mention past research that is not perfectly related to my proposed endeavor, but is related to my field?
Yes, this comes to the fact that we all have these kind of multifaceted aspects of our background. And so, yes, definitely, past research, even if it's not directly related to your proposed endeavor, but it's related to your field, I mean, that still goes towards the work that you're doing. And so without knowing the exact details of it, I will say you want to make sure that you are using the language very carefully, because what you don't want is an officer who's quickly going through these things to see, okay, you've done research in this field, and then all of a sudden we're talking about this other proposed endeavor that's has a different aspect to it. So you want to do the best that you can to align these things, perhaps in demonstrating how that research led you to the work that you propose, or things like that. For example, I mentioned earlier, I studied economics. It was a pre-law degree. I intended it to be a pre-law degree. And so somebody could look at that, and I mean, depending, not saying that I would apply for a national interest waiver for that, but talking about the purposes of where I was headed with it, that kind of informs things differently. I can talk about the cases that I worked on shortly or during law school or after law school that utilize my economics degree or things like that. So I would find ways to try to have some overlap in there, but those are just some thoughts on that.
Right. To try to connect them if possible, basically, and make use of them. It needs to be somewhat related, right? If there's no relation at all, maybe not. But a lot of times, I think, and that's where good lawyers would come in handy, and drawing those links between the different evidence and the story that you are presenting and all that, and so you can make the most out of it.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt. And the one thing I would add to that is just think through what is the reason why you would like to bring it up. Really, that's kind of an overarching aspect of this, because if that's where it comes to connecting all of this together.
Yeah, good point. So hello from Los Angeles. It says someone, can I retain the priority date of a previously approved EB3 I-140 in an NIW, EB2 NIW application? What is the process for doing so?
Yes, anytime you have an earlier priority date for an approved petition in the employment-based field, yes, you can use that. The way you do that is on your cover letter, you want to make it very clear that you have a prior approval. You need to attach or enclose the approval notice, and state that you want to retain that priority date. It can be a headache to try to fix that if it doesn't come through. But
so you say that you should do it already in the I-140 step, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so they know, and then in adjustment of status, I guess you would do it again, remind them, remember, I have this approval, please honor it, right?
That's right.
And I think I know the answer to this question, but you can do that within or in between employment-based categories, but you cannot cross from family to employment, right?
Yes. So you can, well said. So you can do both of these separately in terms of if you have a family-based petition, you can use an earlier priority date. Oftentimes that there are some complexities there, but yes, this there isn't a way for you to do an overlap between the family-based or employment.
Good. So next, and we are getting to the end, so maybe last one or second to last.
Difficult to choose.
I'm sure Evan is getting a little bit tired, right? Very short questions.
Yeah. You guys make the call. I'm happy to just keep going as long as you need to.
So the next question is about the proposed endeavor statement. How important is it for a proposed endeavor statement to draw a clear line between the actual national interest outcome and the implementation details?
Well, this is a good question. It actually kind of brings the prongs 1 and 2 together, because what you're saying is essentially how much do we need to draw a line between prongs 1 and 2? If you look at the details that USCIS has on their website it's in their policy manual. It goes through a lot of the things that people can do to show they're well positioned to carry out the endeavor. A lot of those things are dealing with those implementation details. What are the plans that you have in place? What are the steps you've already taken to implement this? What funding have you received? That type of a thing. And so it is important to be able to discuss both of those, because they go towards the first and second prongs. And so, but in terms of, when you make those points, I would say first really go all in on demonstrating that national interest, because that is the most important part of this. Then once you have that, then you pivot toward, okay, now let me show you what the implementation details look like. Here's how it would unfold. And this could be done. Oftentimes people will put together a business plan or a professional plan that has milestones that they plan to achieve by a given point. They can be looking at past things that you've done, past businesses that you've run, even if it's not in your field. Running a business has just this, there's this aspect to that can demonstrate you've done this before, you can do it again in this way. And that's why you have to be careful by discussing what you've done in the past, if it may have a different title, so to speak, right? Because the officers are looking for consistency. But look at presenting this in a way that says, I've done this in the past. This gives you a good idea to show that I can do this in the future. One example that I would have you consider is, think about what happens when somebody approaches an investor to invest in them. They want to be confident that you're going to be able to put your idea into practice and have a return on that investment. And so this is kind of a similar way to think through this, as you are basically asking the government to take a gamble on your idea, your proposed endeavor, because you think it's going to be in the economic interest.
So why would we pick you, right? Like,
right.
What do you have to offer?
Right. Yeah, and that's kind of an overarching framework from this. The benefit from this is not the success of the business for like the returns to the investors, but it's the government's going to reward you with a visa.
Yeah, which is a big reward. It's permanent residence at the end. So it's normal that they want to see some assurances that you can deliver. So I think we're going to end here. Before we go, I just want to remind people that we have this offer with Manifest Law that they were generous to provide. If you need a U.S. attorney, you can get this $500 discount if you use that URL you have on the screen. Later, when the video is already uploaded normally in YouTube, we're going to put it in the comment section as well, so you can easily click on that. But remember that if you are a do-it-yourself petitioner, we also have our courses. So we are not saying here that one way or the other are the right ways to do it. There are both routes, and you are the one that needs to pick which one you want or you can do. We also know that some people cannot afford both options. So there's a way for everyone if you have the credentials to do this. And I want to really thank Evan that has put some time and effort to be here with us today, and you have responded to so many questions. And I want to know also if people want to repeat these kind of sessions in the future. We would love to get your feedback and see what do you think about this new format where we get someone as experienced as Evan to talk a little bit about a particular topic, to answer questions. Really, please provide your feedback, and as usual, we read all the comments. We respond to a lot of them as well, so let us know. But thank you, Marina, for moderating as usual. Thank you, Evan, of course, for being here, and thanks on our behalf and our audience. Thank you, Manifest Law, also for being here as a company as well.
Sure. Thank you so much. It was great being with you, and let us know if we can help in any way. All
right. Well, take care, and to everyone, good luck in your EB2 NIW or EB1A journey. See you next time.